Hi, everyone. I hope you all are doing great. Thank you for joining us. And today's topic is one of my interesting and favorite, how to get a strong recommendation letters that actually move the needle, who to ask, what to include in formatting the best practices, basically for EB1A or extraordinary ability that we are going to talk about. So just wanted to add a few lines before we start the session with Michael. So there is an uncomfortable truth about the recommendation letter, and that is most EB1A recommendation letters are I've seen very mediocre, and they are generic and they are interchangeable as well. They are written in a hurry by well-meaning colleagues or who have never read an immigration regulation in their lives. And adjudicators who read it, they expect something very different than what we submit. So it needs to align with the narration of your EB1A petition rather than just submitting supportive as a criteria or supportive to an evidence which is going weak. So today, Michael is going to help us and will teach us how we can get to write better and strong recommendation letters in our petitions. Thank you, Michael, for joining us. All yours.
Hey, Swati, do you mind giving me an opportunity to share screen so that I
Okay.
can bring up the presentation? Good day, everybody. I won't say morning because it's already afternoon where I'm at, so everybody's in different places. Good to have you guys here. Yeah, we're going to talk about it because Swati is absolutely right. And what we'll look at here in just a minute is talking about the genericness, but also like unfounded or unproven praise, right? Basically, that's what it is. And we have a recent RFE. It wasn't my client. It was an RFE I was reading from somebody else that had been previously ordered denied before they came to us. And they used the word hyperbole, which is a very interesting word for describing the letters that were written by colleagues. And so, did you give me a sharing opportunity? So it looks like one of them has it, but maybe not the one I want to share from, the one that doesn't have video.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Now
No,
you
that's
have
okay.
it. Now
Okay,
you have
great.
it.
There we go. All right. So let's get into it. Here we go. So, and I'm going to make this small a bit percent. Okay, everybody should be able to see my screen. I'm going to go up. We'll start talking about it. So letters of recommendation that win EB1 and O1A cases. Like Swati said, I'm Michael Hendricks. I've been an immigration attorney for almost 15 years. I've been working in immigration for 15 years. I've processed through my firm and through my tech over 4,000 cases, very, very, very high win rate. And so that includes all kinds from court representation asylums and EB 42Bs, which are cancellation removals, all the way through family-based and naturalizations, renewals, and all the way to the expert ones for EB1As and O1As and so on. So what we're talking about here is based on a lot of experience, which is important because it's easy to talk about something from a theoretical perspective, kind of like in college or in our graduate programs. A lot of information is theoretical. What we're wanting to do is go more practical here, actually put into practice what we know works so that we can avoid RFEs and avoid noise and noids and avoid the various different types like denials in the end, God forbid. So the problem with most recommendation letters are that they're generic, unfocused, and legally ineffective. And there's a reason for this. Because number one, not all of them, but there are many recommendation letters that they fail to establish the credibility of the author, right? Why is this person's opinion of any consequence to USCIS? That's the first key. So, and this is actually how you build it, right? Who is this person? Why does it matter? How do they know you? And then no measurable impact, praise without data, right? So it's like, okay, you get to the point where it's like, okay, we think that this person's opinion is important and it's valid. Well, they don't have any measurable impact, right? So specificity that actually talks about your role, right? Whether that's critical role or your original contribution or whatever it may be, but that aligns with the criteria that you're trying to prove in your EB1A or O1A. This is important because, as you see at the bottom, we can prevent cases from being denied. We can help them be approved by having good letters, but weak letters make sometimes outright denials, and they don't always are automatically outright denials because it takes a while to look through 1,000-page application, right? So they usually result in fees and unnecessary delays. And here's a dirty secret that no one will tell you. Every time an officer has to re-review something, they're going to find it a little more than they did the first time. Every time they have to put eyes on something again, they're going to find something else. The great thing about human review, right? And they are using AI review now too, which is important key as well. But the great thing about human review is humans, we look through things and we see what we're going to see on the first pass. What the idea is to make the application and the letter of recommendation approvable on the first pass. Because if they're like, oh, they see some issues there, and then they go, okay, we're going to come back to that, and then they come back to it, guess what? They're going to see other issues because their eyes are going to focus in different places. They're going to key on what they already saw, and then they're going to add to it. So making it easy for the USCIS officer to say, that's a great recommendation letter. That is one of the main keys to being able to move through and be approved at the highest level. And what I mean by the highest level, if you think about it like a sales funnel, all the way at the top, you get the leads in, right? So you have marketing that's happening up here, you get leads in, and then you pull them down the sales funnel. Okay, is the lead eligible? Is the lead able to pay? And then, okay, now we close it. So at the bottom of the funnel. What you want is that the letter of recommendation come into the top of the funnel and be seen at the top of the funnel. And instead of having to go through all these different reviews, goes directly down to, okay, that's an approved letter of recommendation. So they fail to align with the criteria is a big part of it. So there's no measurable impact combined with they're failing to actually align with the criteria. So they're saying great things about you, but it's not specific to the criteria that your application is looking to prove. So the true role of the recommendation letter, once again, very important. This is not a formality. It is evidence. Okay. So think about if you're in court. When you're in court, what you do is you bring in an expert witness, right? That expert witness is supposed to specifically talk about one piece of information for the case, right? That expert witness then sits on the stand, gets sworn in, and then there's an examination. So there's these questions, right? I can do these questions, and they're supposed to be open-ended questions, but there's prep that happens before that so that they know what they're supposed to say in order to prove whatever piece of the case that they're trying to prove. But then there's also cross-examination. And that's when the defense or whoever it is comes out and starts doing leading question. Isn't it true that you? Isn't it true that this? Isn't it true that that? And it's yes or no answers, no open ends. USCIS operates as a cross-examiner. The letter is the original examination. So putting in that letter what you need that person to prove for your case is key because the cross-examiner, which is the US government, is going to come in and they're going to ask leading questions in the document. The good thing is that when you're in court, that person getting a leading question can then say, yes, that's true, but, and they can go on and speak a little further. Whereas in the letter, they don't have the opportunity to do that. The answer is in the letter and there's no ability to follow that up. So having proper letters, making sure that you understand they're the cornerstone of the evidentiary record. And that USCIS officers and adjudicators rely on them to form a complete picture of the beneficiary standing. Remember, you don't have any ability to then talk to them subsequently. That's where an RFE comes in. So if they have questions that aren't answered, that's when they start asking you for additional information, which then invites a new review. So we need to validate and corroborate the claims, provide a third-party expert analysis of the beneficiary's work, and establish reputation and recognition that documents alone cannot convey. That's the problem. So a document, great, right? I'm giving you a piece of evidence. Now, the expert letters or the letters of recommendations are coming into saying, why is this document important and how does this document connect to the criteria that we're trying to prove? This is like expert testimony before a federal adjudicator. That's what it is. So when we start looking at through it that lens, it's not just somebody saying, hey, he's really good at what he does and he's a really good guy or girl, right? It's actually an expert testimony about your application and your case. So what they're actually evaluating. They're evaluating credibility, they're evaluating authority, and they're evaluating knowledge. They're also evaluating substance, okay? So they want to make sure this person's credible, that they have authority to speak on this, that they're knowledgeable about the situation and about you specifically in a situation, and that the substance they provide, which is where a lot of people fall short, they do a good job saying this is a VP of Wells Fargo or whatever else, right? So it establishes the credibility. I worked for Wells Fargo, or Wells Fargo uses my system, right? So now they have knowledge. I've heard of so-and-so, this applicant, the beneficiary, through this work. But then the substance. Man, this is great architecture. It's really helped us out a lot. Way too generic, right? This specific data structure allowed us to increase fraud detection by 35% year over year. Whoa, that's a huge impact. And then you have the person from Bank of America that says the same thing, right? So having the substance in there that specifically talks about the work and the impact it has had. So strategic selection of recommenders. So how do we make sure that we're choosing the right people to write these letters? The highest value person to write a letter is an independent expert, okay? This is not a person that has a direct personal relationship with you. They have no financial interest in what you've done. They're recognized authorities who are the beneficiary only through the work's impact and reputation, okay? If that sounds hard to find, you're right. It is. But that's what makes EB1A extraordinary, right? Versus being like, hey, you're an ordinary person, right? So extraordinary means that these people who we could find, that can be found, can talk about what you've done, the applicant or the beneficiary, what the applicant or beneficiary has done and how it's affected them without having personal knowledge of you. In other words, they don't know you. If they saw you in a cafe, they probably wouldn't know who you are. Those are the highest value. Dependent internal experts, employers, direct supervisors, collaborators, they provide important operational context, especially when we're talking about critical role, right? I've had a critical role in this organization and I've made an impact that has resulted in an increase of whatever or a decrease of whatever through my work. Important. But also remember that critical role, USCIS could look at it without the right recommender and without the right information. USCIS could just say, you're a really good employee. That doesn't make you an extraordinary ability person, right? An applicant for extraordinary ability. So it has to be written correctly so that they can make sure. So the objectivity is inherently limited. That's one of the problems. That's when the word hyperbole comes in. This is great work. They're phenomenal. They're at the top of their field. Well, how? Prove it to me. How can you prove that? And then you've got high-level recognized figures, executives, public figures, and industry leaders. They carry a lot of prestige, but only when the recommender's authority is rigorously established within the letter itself. Okay, that's very important because this could be the guy from, let's say one of the creators of Google, right? And Google doesn't use your software, but because of the impact whatever you've done has created or has had on the field, they've heard about it and they can write a letter saying, I haven't directly had to use it, but I have all of these people that I know. I'm an expert in this field. I have all these people that I know. They do use it. And this is what they're saying about it, right? But you have to establish their credibility. So you have to have a good mix of all three because you need people that are dependent and internal, right? You need people like that. That's where you're going to get the majority of your letters. But just remember that those are the ones that the government looks at with the highest amount of scrutiny because those people know you. They want to help you generally. Even if you could say, that Kathy at the office, she always hated me, but she's writing me a letter of recommendation. That should get more weight because she wouldn't say a nice thing about me unless it were true. The government doesn't know that, and you can't say that in your letter. So just make sure that there's a good balance of these. Okay, so most important rule, it is not who you know, it's how we position who you know, okay? Establishing a good position for the author provides even greater credibility, okay? So weak position equals low impact. A Nobel laureate whose letter fails to establish their credentials, explain the relationships, or support their assertions carries almost no evidentiary value, okay? Regardless of how impressive they are in real life. And in fact, we've seen this. Just recently, I talked to a person that he has done some great things. Like he's created some awesome stuff that's being used by a bunch of companies, including Fortune 500 companies. but yet he's been denied. Why? A failure to establish the position and show who he actually is, and Kazarian, the impact he's had on the field. So the contributions that have had an impact on the field. So what does positioning mean? How the person's credentials are framed, specific titles, recognitions in industry roles. And this is not just for your writer or your author. This is for you as well. We have to establish this for you in the letters. How the relationship is explained, clarity on how and why they know the beneficiary, and then how their opinion is supported. So the ethos, the credibility that comes in from this. Okay, let's move on. Anatomy of a winning recommendation letter. I think this is why we're all here. So this is how it's built. You're starting with recommender, authority. Okay, Vikas, yeah, I think the recording will be shared. Okay, so we're starting with the recommender's authority. Who are they? Why does it matter? Then, how does the recommender, and this is literally the construct. So what I'm giving you is kind of like a secret sauce a little bit here. So the relationship to the beneficiary. How does this person know the beneficiary? That could be a professional interaction. That could be that, like I said before, like this high-level authoritative figure that knows of your work because of being in the industry. So they don't know you personally, but they know of your work, and they know your name because you're the one that created whatever it is that you did or had a critical role in creating whatever it is that they're talking about. A detailed evaluation, specific, substantive analysis of the beneficiary's work, achievements, and their significance. A lot of places, a lot of letters fall short right here. A lot of people understand I have to show why this person's opinion matters. I have to show how this person knows about me, right? But what they forget is I need to show specific information. And I like more specific is better, right? Not having a 20-page letter of recommendation, no one's going to read that, just so you know. But having a letter of recommendation that is a good 3 or 4 pages long, but has multiple examples of how the work has impacted the field, right? And it could be that this writer, this author has only one. That's okay. Make sure the specificity is in there. Make sure that it's very clear how what you did had an impact and what the measurable impact was. Oh man, this changed how Wells Fargo does business all over. Well, that's great, but how, right? It's great to say that it did it, and it's great that that's the impact that you've had, but how does it do it? How has it impacted? Has it increased productivity? Has it decreased fraud? Has it, all of these different things? We have to look at specificity of specific situations that talk about how your work has had an impact on this company, field, and mostly field, because remember in Kazarian, it's not just about a company, it's impact on the field, right? Comparative analysis, explicitly position the beneficiaries relative to peers, right? So in comparison, there are other systems like X, right? Or other, methodologies like X that have a lower impact. This one has a greater impact, and that other one's being used in companies all over the world, right? But this is a new way of doing a new methodology that has a greater impact, and here's how we've shown this impact. So showing a comparative analysis, if it exists, which most things there is some type of a comparative analysis. So finding those and being like, this is the difference between what's currently being used and the new thing, and this is how it's improved. And strong, unambiguous conclusion. Very, very clear. I believe, based on my expert opinion, this is how I would start it for the author. I believe that based on my expert opinion and my authority in this field, my personal knowledge, that due to the work that so-and-so has done in such and such area, this places this person in the top of their field, and probably including the top 5% or something like that, because that's really what they're looking at. Are you at the top 10% of your field? That's what, if you had to measure it out, that's what they're looking at. Are you at the top 10% of your field? If the answer is yes, then that's what you want to make very clear and very unambiguous, very, very unambiguous in your statement, in the letter of recommendation. So how do we establish the recommender's authority? I think that this is something that says this is where most letters fail first. True, because it's the first thing that's written. You need to make sure that it's clearly established if they have advanced degrees, specialized knowledge, current profession and role, scope of influence, industry recognition, maybe awards, publications, editorial boards, leadership positions, institutional affiliations, years of relevant experience in the field, right? And you're really looking at, why should I trust this person's assessment? That's the question that the USCIS adjudicator is asking. Why would I care what this person has to say? This is how we're establishing. This is who it is. This is what, maybe they have degrees, maybe they have specialized knowledge. This is their role. They're currently the CEO of some large corporation, and they're, industry recognition. They're also the president of X location. Like, we had a letter come in the other day that was specifically a letter from the CEO and director of IEEE, right? That's huge. IEEE is a internationally known organization, right? And so having the CEO write about the person is very big. And also the words that the CEO, she used in this, were very important. I believe that because of this information, because of this work, it puts so-and-so in the top of their field. So very important, establish it. Now explain how the recommenders relationship exists. So independent relationship, strong for EBD1A. Dependent relationship, in other words, they're a close collaborator and they could have a financial benefit from your work or something like that. Of course, that kind of decreases their credibility. You still need letters like that in order to support. But remember that how you have a relationship, the further away the relationship is with knowledge, the stronger it gets, because there's no intrinsic benefit for the author. Writing the evaluation, where cases are won and lost, and this is absolutely true, because you can have all the evidence in the world, but if you don't tie the evidence together, it's kind of like your body. You have your muscles and you have your bones, right? But you have to attach the muscle to the bone, right? So without the ligaments and without the other things that are attaching, bones to muscle, then you have an issue, right? Connective tissue is very important, and the letters are the connective tissue. Here's all of this evidence and all of this stuff. Now, why does it matter? And that's where the letters of recommendation come in. So strong letters describe specific name achievements, explain why those achievements matter in the field, connect individual work to industry-wide or national impact, and use data, metrics, and outcomes wherever possible. Data, metrics, and outcomes. Key. If available, key. That is where you win and lose, okay? Showing the data, the metrics, and the outcomes can help you prove industry-wide or national impact, okay? Weak letters, they use the words like praise words like brilliant, exceptional, outstanding, but they lack specific details and fail to explain the significance and leave the officer guessing why any of it matters. So that's what we're trying to cure. Comparative language, very important as well. Beneficiary stands in the small percentage at the very top of their field. Why? Because when you compare it to whatever's being used right now, to the new thing and impact that it has, then it shows that everyone in this field has been doing one thing. They've been stuck with blinders on. And you've now taken the blinders off and said, but there's a new way to do things. You're the Galileo, right? And so you're the Newton of the new day. So that's what you're trying to prove. And these are some examples of ways that you can use that. I like the percentage among the top 1% in the professionals I have encountered in over 20 years in this field. I like things like that. But once again, you have to be careful to make sure that it doesn't sound like hyperbole. If the evidence doesn't back up what they're saying, then it won't matter that they're saying it, right? Because it's the combination of the two, bones and muscle being connected. So strong conclusions. Never leave it up to chance. Finish strong. So I strongly, without reservation, recommend approval of this position. There's no doubt in my mind that beneficiary meets and exceeds the standards for extraordinary ability. Now, the officer may look at that and go, well, that's not for you to decide. That doesn't mean you can't say it. This is an expert testimony, okay? Testimony, just like in court, can draw conclusions. They can give opinions. Why? Because they're brought in under the Daubert standard to say, hey, we're bringing you in because you've established your credentials to show that your opinion matters, okay? A lot of times in court, you can't give opinion. Well, I think that they were thinking this. No. Or I heard so-and-so say, no, you can't do that, right? The hearsay or conjecture, right? In this case, these people are the expert witnesses that are brought in order to provide their opinion about this person, the applicant. So weak endings, I believe they are qualified. I support their application. I hope you will consider them favorably. Some people do that because they're not as sure that they should be writing it, and they're doing it as a favor, right? And so we want to make sure that if those letters come up, it's like, okay, are you willing for us to change the end, right? And if they're like, I just don't know, then at that point, that may be a letter that's discarded, right? We don't want to provide weak letters because weak letters invite more scrutiny. Okay. Common mistakes, template based generic letters. Okay. Copy paste letters, swap names, signal low effort, carry near zero evidentiary weight. I don't think this is happening anymore. And I know this doesn't happen with Visa Architects and Open Atlas and those guys. It doesn't happen there. But making sure that AI is using information that doesn't seem like a copy and paste, because a lot of these kinds of letters, they're written with AI, right? Because AI is the new world. So making sure that we understand, okay, this is exactly what they're looking for, but it doesn't look like copy and paste. No measurable outcomes. Huge problem, huge red flag. Oh, this person's great. They've done so much work. They created a whole new type of data architecture that helps us be able to do this, that, and the other, but there's no measurable, like helps us be able to decrease fraud. Okay, great. But then there's nothing that says it's actually helped, instance, Wells Fargo be able to decrease fraud over 30% year over year since the implementation of this data architecture, this new structure or methodology, right? That's what you want to see. Numbers matter. Over reliance on internal recommenders. I think this is a problem because a lot of people get caught here because they're not thinking out of the box of how do I find the other people. What I tell people all the time, I was like, look, go on LinkedIn, find the people who are highest in their field. If they don't know who you are, if they'll connect with you, if they don't know who you are, send them a letter, invite them to have a quick meeting. Some of them won't be able to, but that's why you got to keep going, right? Until you find the people that can do it, that are the right to speak on this. And then you provide them the information they need, right? Like, hey, I would love to give you a free look into the system to be able to see it, to be able to see how it works. And I would love for you to be able to, I'm doing this. I'm trying to get my green card through extraordinary ability. And so I need people who can look at it. And so take a look at it for free. I'll walk you through it if you'd prefer. And that way they get to look at it and be able to make a educated decision on whether or not that's something that they're willing to cooperate with. But you could reach out to 100 people and only get one of them to say yes. So it's work. It's work. But I think most of you guys are used to it. Poorly established recommender credibility. That's pretty self-explanatory. And then recommenders writing without guidance. That should never happen. That they need to have PhD and working in life. They need to have guidance in this, because it's kind of like when you have an expert witness going into court. That expert witness doesn't just show up one day and sit down in court and then answer questions. No, there are prep sessions, usually multiple prep sessions before their turn to go into court, in order to be able to make sure that what they're saying is what needs to be said. Okay, EB1 versus O1A, aligning letters to the legal standard. Of course, the categories have different requirements, 3 versus 2 criteria. I know a lot of people really want to go on and say, but I have 5 criteria. It doesn't matter. It's kind of like the bar. And when you're going to take the bar examination to pass the bar, you could pass the bar with 2 points, or you could pass it by, flying colors with 100 extra points. It won't matter. Either way, you're a lawyer. So the criteria are there for a reason. So instead of working on making 5 more, trying to do 6 criteria instead of 3, it's better to focus on the 3 or 4 that you can deeply root in truth and evidence and letters, making sure that the criteria are not wide. There's not a bunch of them, but rather creating depth to the ones that you have. If it's membership, and being involved in the membership, making sure that you have the bylaws for how you got that membership. Did you have to purchase it? Is there do they do scrutiny on looking at your actual historical work that you've done to see what impact it's had, right? There's all of these different things that can build out the criteria rather than trying to focus on expanding to more criteria. Find the 3 or 4 that you can focus on: original contribution, critical role, membership, authorship, judgment, being a judge or peer review, having stuff written about you, right? Notoriety in the press, right, about you. So focusing on the ones that you can really prove. And because we saw this recently as well, to where the same guy that had gotten the RFE and then later a denial, once again, not with us, with someone else previously, came to us to fix everything. His thing was that he had only ever had press written about him in the last 2 years. Well, that's the last 2 years that he'd been working on trying to get approved for an EB1A. Well, that looks suspicious. No one's ever written anything about you until you you want to apply for an EB-1A. Okay, maybe having press written about you is not the criteria you want to focus on. Let's focus on the stuff that you have strong. And guess what? If you don't have a strong enough 3 criteria, maybe we'll look at O1A as a bridge before doing EB-1A, and then work over the next several years in order to establish a depth in criteria for an EB-1A. How strong letters are actually built: identity of the recommender, okay, of the right recommenders, identifying them, extract key achievements and metrics, align letters to case strategy. That's exactly what Swati was talking about. Making sure that your letters of recommendation are actually supporting what you're trying to prove in your application, drafting with precision, and then refining. Make sure that your authors, the people that are writing these for you, know that this is going to be an ongoing process for the next several months. They won't have to spend a whole lot of time. We do most of the heavy lifting. You do most of the heavy lifting, but it still will be to where they have to review it maybe multiple times. Reading a 4-page letter. People send me stuff. I had a person in my law firm said, "Hey, we have this person wants information." Sent me a 5-minute audio file. And I'm like, I don't, even at 1.5 speed, I didn't have time. I was working on a project. I don't have time to sit there and listen to a 5-minute audio file. I'm like, just tell me what the person is saying. And so that's how people are when we're busy. I'm a CEO. I have 2 different companies, and I own some other ones as well where I'm operating in. And so it's like, I don't have time to sit there and listen to that. I need to make it as easy as possible. So that's your position, and our position is to make it as easy as possible for your recommender so that they can know exactly what's being written on their behalf and they can just sign off on it. So role of technology. Okay, this is where Leo comes in. So Leo is an AI purpose built for immigration. And it is not just writing letters of recommendation and aligning frameworks, but it's also, reviewing processes, making sure you do full audits. This is one of my companies. ALT is a legal technology, so it actually builds the case. Not really relevant to most of you guys, although I think we'll probably do more training for those of you that start working with Visa Architect and Open Ventures and all those guys, because technology is technology. All technology is different, right? In essence, it's a lot of it's the same, but visibly, or the UX of it can be different. And so making sure that you understand that. But Leo, it stands for Legal Efficiency Operator. He can actually answer any questions you have. So if you have questions about your EB-1A or your O-1A or your NIW or your L or whatever visa it is that you're wanting to look at that you are processing, I think it's $25 a month. You as the applicant can get a subscription to that and be able to have that to where you can ask it, right? Because it's very frustrating when you want to ask something and nobody's available, right? And I know that because we all work the same hours, right? So if you're at work, then I just had a guy the other day, he was telling me he works on his EB-1A application from 6 p.m. when he gets off work to midnight. That's what he did. That's when he does it. Well, guess what? All offices are closed from 6 p.m. to midnight, right? So it makes it inevitable to where he wants to ask questions, but the questions can't be answered in a timely manner immediately because there's no one available at that time when he's available. So just having this would allow you to get answers to questions at a 24/7, 365. So structured, consistent outputs. This is what I use for my letters of support. And once again, it's basically my brain, and then the INA, the A for decisions and appeals off of USCIS, the BIA for decisions out of the Board of Immigration Appeals, case law from the Supreme Court, federal courts, all of these like Kazarian, all these guys, right? So it includes all of that inside the database for the corpus, and he's not able to look on the internet, so he won't hallucinate for you, right? I can't guarantee he never hallucinates. We've never had an example of hallucination, but we have very high fidelity. So if you're interested in that, you can let me know. It is a way for you to have a really good opportunity to basically have an expert immigration attorney on your computer or your phone to be able to ask questions and get help as you're moving forward. So key takeaways: letters are expert evidence, not formalities. These aren't just friends talking about how good of a person you are. These are actual expert evidence, expert witnesses. Structure and strategy beat length. Once again, 20 pages is not mean it's a good letter, right? You need to make sure that it includes the specific data. In fact, USCIS adjudicators are just like everyone else. They have a job to do. And if somebody throws in front of you a project that says, hey, you need to get this done tonight, and it's this huge project, you're going to be frustrated. The same thing is true, not just with USCIS adjudicators, with judges, right? When you submit a motion or something like that, they're the same way. So in law school, what they taught us was you want to pay yourself for every word you can get rid of. Pay yourself for every word that you can scratch out of your document. Why? Because being concise and impactful is way better than being flowery and long, right? Length is not going to be what wins. Width of criteria is not going to be what wins. It's depth. So you need to make sure that you have a good, clear letter of recommendation that is not super long and that covers the areas necessary. Credibility and specificity determine impact. Okay, is the author credible, and what level of specificity can be provided to the impact that whatever work you've done has had in your field. Weak letters limit strong cases. You can have a really strong case, and then you invite additional reviews every time they read a bad letter, a letter that is weak, a letter that is generic, a letter that has no specificity. So this is what invites RFEs and denials and makes appeals and stuff much more likely. Okay, so ready to build your case the right way? Yes, case evaluation, recommender strategy, and full case build. So if you guys don't already have somebody that you're working with, then make sure that you're asking for information about how to get your case built properly. With Hendricks Law, with Visa Architect, we work very closely to make sure that we're able to help you get from where you're at now to where you need to be. And I saw a couple of questions. Let me actually go in here to the Q&A. Okay, I work for clients through service providing. So what is the advisable of our manager press? So I work for clients through service providing company. Okay, because what kind of service is it? Because
You can just unmute yourself
Yeah,
and
I'm here.
explain.
I'm here. Yeah. So I actually, I'm talking about the IT services.
Okay.
I work for Comcast through Cognizant, and right now I'm working in a healthcare industry from last 6 years. So I have this doubt that like, should I approach to my like the managers and the technical people on the client side or on my employer side to
both,
to
both, both.
both?
So because I'm assuming, I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm assuming it's not something that's an original contribution, right? You're not reinventing, you didn't reinvent the wheel. You're just implementing better strategies. Is that correct?
No, we have implemented a new strategy actually. I mean, on this call, it's not possible to explain everything, but yeah, like when I was working in Comcast, we have completely implemented a new concept basically, which is helping Comcast still in terms of saving money and getting more business.
And you
Yeah.
had a critical role in that strategy and in that implementation?
Yes, I
Okay.
was.
So I would definitely get it from Comcast. Comcast is a nationally known corporation, right? So I would definitely get it from Comcast with specificity. This is how this new strategy or product or process improved X, Y, and Z, actual numbers. Like we increased 30% deliverability because, right? Something like that.
Right. Okay.
So yes, but yeah, you would want it from both the people in your the corporation that have been benefited from your work, but also end users too, because that shows impact as well. But that's something we would talk about very specifically in a prep session. I think Swati was saying that she can help with that as well. So Suhendra says, how do we get access to the AI tool? I can send out a link. In fact, I'll put it here. That way everybody has the ability to just go. I got to move this navigation bar. There we go. Okay. Pricing. There we go. So you would use the $25 applicant account. That's what it is on that. So there's corporations, there's law firms that use it all over the country as well. So you guys would be using the applicant account, and that's the one that's $25 a month. So I'm going to put that in there as well. Okay, let's see. Okay, will the recording be shared? I believe so. Also available on YouTube. Great. Access to the slides. Swati, I can give you access to the Gamma if we need to. That way you can send it out to people if you want. And then Arika says, sorry, I speak a bunch of languages. So sometimes I want to get rid of the H. So Harika says, can you talk about folks? What's that? Oh, can you talk about folks with PhD working in life science, biomedical science, more specifically, the use of citations, research papers as evidence? 100%. Showing that you've written a research paper is now not sufficient. Authorship is one of the criteria, right? I'm an author, right? I've had things published works. But just having published works now doesn't mean anything. You have to show that, number one, that published work was in a credible publication, right? And USCIS is very quickly discounting previous publications, okay? Where they're like, oh, great, you got published on MSN, or somebody wrote about you on MSN, but MSN.com is not meant for the people that it's being, like your people, like your field. And there's been nobody talk about it. There's no citation. So authorship, and versus being, something, publications that are written about you, having research papers and other types of authorships that are impactful is only shown through citation. Because citation means that other people in your field read your paper, found your paper credible, and then used your paper as a piece of authority for a subsequent paper. That's what citation is, right? They could be saying, I agree with and expand on. They could be saying, here's another unique ability. Or they could be saying, I disagree with, right? But either way, you've had an impact, because now they've looked at your research and they did enough work on your research to verify, to see what it was saying, to understand it, and then to respond to it. Do you have something to add, Swati?
Yeah, I see the way that I usually help my clients or researchers who do have a citation. And sometimes we also have expert industrials who does have citation. So how the citations are used in a way, those particular articles should have been used by some peers or some other members who are constantly working in your you can say in your domain itself, and if they are using it or they are implementing in their own work and citing it, we can definitely use those citations. Now, previously USCIS was okay just to navigate that evidence, but nowadays it's like you have to showcase more. So what you can showcase, the person who is citing, you also have to showcase who's that person, a professor or an industry expert, what is his like long experience journey, plus why he has cited you. So what he has cited from your article. And we also have to give a short description about what his article says and how your citation contributes. So this is a kind of an argument where you have to do a cross verification in the petition. And that's where your work and that person's work gets verified. That, okay, this was cited for XYZ and this is the impact of the citation. I think Harika wants to say something because she raised the hand.
Yes. Thank you so much, both of you, for answering that question and for all the information. I had a follow-up to the information we both just presented about the citations part, right? So I have a bunch of citations for a couple of papers. I know that I have a couple more, at least in the pipeline, that'll get published. Is that true, Swati, what you just said, is that true for like every citation, or does that mostly apply for a lower number of citations, say like 3 or 5 or in the single digits? Like, because I'm wondering if it breaches like 10 or 20, having that extra information of how that research, like my research, was used by another person becomes like a very long kind of documentation. And another question I had was, is there a threshold of how many citations a person needs to have to be presented as strong? Like, let's say they have one superstar journal publication that like went viral, versus they have 3 different papers that are like around 50 citations each.
Okay, to your first question, out of 10 or 15 citations, if you have for one paper, you don't have to navigate all the 50. Just pick the best ones. 3,
Yeah.
2,
Okay.
4, that's it. And for
Yeah.
your second question that you asked, can you repeat, please?
Is there
She's
a
asking
threshold of how
about,
many
is there a threshold?
citations?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, the number of citations, okay. The number of citations are not necessarily have a threshold, like we need 150 citations or 200. But since if your profile is researcher, a significant amount of citation is important in your petition, because a researcher have a different domain and expected criterias, expected one of the anchor criteria would be research papers. So
Mhm.
definitely a citation of at least more than 100 or 120 is needed. So it also depends upon your paper. So if you have a paper from the back from the year 2012 or 2013 or 14, so then expected citation of accumulation would be more than 200 or 150 plus around. It should be in 3 digits or at least 2 digits, which would be crossing 80 plus around. So citations also needs to come in a very generic manner, in an organic manner. So it takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
that's the longer duration of the citation that takes time, because you don't know who's going to cite your work and when they are going to write a paper, and then they figure out a paper about you and then they thought that, oh, this is a great piece of writing, let's just cite it in our work. So that's how it usually works. But there is no threshold for any kind of number of citations. I myself
Yeah.
has prepared petitions with 19 digits of this 19 citations. And that was also EB1 back in before 2 years, it got approved. And I myself prepared a petition with almost more than like 90 plus citation, and that was also approved. So it totally depends upon the significance and understanding of how your petition is like been narrated and positioned. And significantly, if there is a researcher profile, that I would really encourage you to have more citations.
Yeah, and I'll add to that, because remember, it's not just about proving the one criteria. It's also about proving impact in your field, right? So impact in your field, that all accumulates, it all kind of bubbles up to showing impact, because you can meet the criteria thresholds and they're like, yep, she's definitely got the authorship, right? Or the researcher element. But does that prove, because this is where Kazarian comes in, does that prove that she's had an impact, right? Is she made an impact in her field? And so obviously more citations are better, but I think very strong citations are just as good, right? Like very strong in prominent things, right, as well, or papers that have gone viral. So
Got it.
Yes.
Thank you.
okay, so that was a question for you, talking about Green Card Inc. Okay. Do open source repos count towards any of the pillars? For example, if my open source repo gets 10K stars or the viewership of the website is in the millions per day. So I'll just say that just because we just saw this with the MSN.com, what they looked at was, first of all, there has to be a clear data about who the author is, right? So you're just talking about, I'm guessing by repo, you mean, Swati, you want to tell me what he's talking about repo? I don't know.
Maybe he's trying to say repost.
No, I think it's talking about the code repository, like GitHub repository.
Could I
Okay.
interject?
Yeah,
Ask
yeah.
the question?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
So so a lot of open source code, right? Like I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I'm pretty sure you guys might have heard OpenClaw recently,
Yes.
Yeah.
right? So OpenClaw is a completely open source tool. The
Mhm.
way
Yes.
that people will get access to it and they're able to download is through this website called GitHub, where you can put all of the code for
Yeah.
free. People can come and look at it, and they can also, I mean, the way that any GitHub repo is generally, like, considered to be a good repo is by counting the number of stars. Like, for example,
Okay.
OpenClaw recently got like millions of stars. I think I'm not exactly sure, but generally that's kind of how, like, you would consider if it is a really good open source contribution or not.
Okay.
So
Yeah. So through
in
GitHub,
regards
I
to
got you. I'm sorry. I wasn't even thinking about GitHub. I'm glad you brought that up. So having an impact in your field, however you can prove that, right? Because this is more Kazarian, right? So this could be more, probably original contribution is actually what this would be for criteria, and then showing that you've made an impact in your field. So obviously having a bunch of people that are using your open source code is a positive proof that you've had an impact, especially if you're talking about in the tens of thousands, right? Then you're looking like, okay, 10,000 people across the country, but you also have to show, because they're looking at international and national impact, right? So even international will be okay, but I would actually have to do more research on that. But my gut opinion on that is, yes, that would be very helpful to prove that you've made an impact on your field. But it would be, so the impact on your field doesn't necessarily mean that independent users are using it. So that's a deeper question. Suhendra, do you have anything to add on that, Swati?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. I was working with one of my client, he has also done some open source work, and a lot of his own domain people are using it. So there is a bridge that he has created between the hardware and the software. So how I have navigated that particular thing is in the original contribution, since it has been like used by many people. And in the open source, there is one thing which is very significant is the usage can be seen very clearly, who is using
Yep.
it. So we can definitely use as that particular asset or artifact as under the original contribution to make a significance understanding that what and how this particular work or innovation or whatever you want to say has been developed. And we need to showcase that how many people are like using. Basically, to show the impact and significance, we have to also showcase that the people are like using, right? And how it's been like completely changed the changed particular set of you can say a system and made people's life easy. I'm not talking about the general public, but also in the domain inside itself, it
Yeah.
creates a lot of value. So definitely you can use this thing. If you ask me, kind of evidence that you can use it, so there is always in open source, I have seen that there is like a metrics going on. So you can screenshot those metrics, which is like a big part of an evidence, and showcase that how many users are using it, how is it going. So I believe there is like month wise or quarter wise metrics you can showcase it. And there are other things also. If you want to understand how you can navigate this in the original contribution, you can give me a short write-up on this and the link of that. I can definitely get back to you with the list of evidence that you can showcase in your original contribution.
Okay, thanks. And if it's all right, I do have one more question. Is it okay?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So a couple of months ago, actually, in my company, we were able to develop a couple of agents, which were using Google's ADK. They have a framework called Agent Development Kit. So we
Yeah.
were able to develop a couple of agents, and this project was the first project in the US which went into production at an enterprise scale using Google ADK, right? So the outcome of that is in the next few months, the company would be writing a case study and publishing it. So my question is, I'm not sure if my name would be included there, because I mean it was a very small team that worked on it, including me, which was like a 3-person team. But I'm not sure if a name would be included because it would be a case study the company presenting the case study, right? Working with Google. So is there a way that I could leverage that somehow to as I'm not sure in any of the contributions or pillars or any of the pillars or something like that. That's just kind of a vague question, but
Interesting. Okay.
As long as you can tie yourself to it, I don't think that's like having yourself named, but if you can tie yourself to it in some way, you can leverage it. But it's a lot harder to leverage that kind of stuff, right? Where you're part of a team, but they don't actually mention you by name. It's much harder. So we'd have to figure out a way to actually connect you to the work, right? I mean, and you have to remember that sometimes when they're looking at a company that's done something, once again, it's not necessarily you that was extraordinary in that situation, but rather just being a good, employee or participant of a team. So sorry, Swati, I think I cut you off.
I'll add something here. You can definitely get a recommendation letter in such situations. It's really appreciated because this is I call as it is a hidden evidence, which cannot be like proved, but it can always be supportive from the back end. So these are the evidence which enhance your petitions. So what you can do is you can definitely get a recommendation letter. And as you said that you don't know whether they will be mentioning anything anywhere or you have a written piece of information. I'm not sure if you received an email or appreciation of email on such kind of projects that you are doing. If you received an appreciation email on such kind of work that you are doing, you can definitely use that appreciation email, redact the confidential information from that email and use that particular appreciation email with the backbone support of the recommendation letter. Get the recommendation letter from somebody who has worked with you in the same project or you were reporting to your manager. So they are in depth understanding that what you have done. That makes a lot of logical as well as more concrete level of evidence because it ties up what you have done and it proves that that particular person whom you have worked with or whom you have reported has same wavelength of understanding that project.
Awesome. Sounds good. Appreciate this. Thanks.
Yep. Just remember, expert witness. That expert witness can say anything. And so that could be what ties you together. But like Swati said, having independent confirmation, like an email, that kind of helps back that up is always going to make your claim more credible. So it looks like there's another question too, Swati. Is it okay for original contribution from two completely different domains? Like I did original contribution in telecom and healthcare, but they're not related. So the way that I'll answer this first. The way that they're implemented or the industry in which a solution is implemented is not as important as the solution itself because you're looking at showing what you've had extraordinary ability in. So if it's like a data architecture system and they've been able to use it in both telecom and healthcare, but if you're saying it's two different types of solutions completely for two different types of industries, I would say you need to pick the one that's the strongest. Do you agree with that, Swati?
Yes, partially I agree, but it also needs to be navigated that your petition cannot be like argued or written in two different domains.
Mm-hmm.
Two completely different domains is something which is going to, give a two different direction to the petition, which is not really encourageable. But what you can do is you have to navigate something in between them. If there is a relation between a healthcare and telecom, then you should definitely understand and make that particular as a field of endeavor, which is important to understand in your petition. Like when anybody starts the EB1A, they have to understand that field of endeavor would be the right take to be taken up. Okay.
Yeah.
And once you choose it, it's okay to showcase the original contribution in two different criteria, two different completely domain, because that was the original contribution. You might have been a software developer in a telecom sector as well as after working for 10 years, you dropped it and changed it to the healthcare, but your software development baseline domain remains the same, right? So you can definitely use that original contribution to like two different original contributions, but the petition narration cannot be two. It has to be one.
Yep.
Or else it will
You have to
dilute the
connect them. Yeah, you have to connect them.
So, or else it will be like completely two pathways, and that creates a lot of confusion in the officer's mind itself. So, my answer is like how to search independent experts on LinkedIn, like any particular keywords. No, independent experts, like anybody who is like not from your domain but independent, having the same, you can say, wavelength or higher than what you are doing and understands. But I don't think so there is any such keywords or anything like that. You can always search around your nearby friends or office people, or the best possible way that I see getting an independent expert letters from conferences. So you attend conferences and you go to there, and then you will be able to figure out a lot of people who are from the same domain, but they don't know you, but they are still able to give you independent experts because for a fact they understand by default that what you are doing, even they are reading your paper, or even they are understanding what you are doing, like just in talking terms. Best way is to figure out from somebody from conferences.
I agree 100%. And you cannot pay for someone to write you an expert letter. You're not supposed to do that. That's considered unethical. If USCIS finds about it, then they'll just discount the letter altogether and probably put a black mark on you for your application. That was another question that was asked earlier.
Yes. I think Muru has raised the hand. It's been a while.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, Swati, for taking up. So one question. So while I seek expert opinion letter, so do we have any preference, like So I work as a solution architect in a Fortune 100 company. So while I seek the expert opinion letter, do you think any preference, like getting a letter from a professor of a call from a college, or versus industry person? Any preference there?
It just needs to be a person that is in your domain and has authority to speak, and then has an established connection. Like they can show how they know your work. So yeah, it really doesn't matter, but they need to be somebody with authority, right? So obviously, university professors, sometimes they work in actual projects. Many of them do, right? But you have this whole group of university professors that just work in theory. And so they could maybe speak theoretically, but then it's hard to provide actual specificity to how, your work has actually impacted. Because remember, we have to show impact. So meeting the criteria is only the first threshold. The approvability on the final merits is impact in your field. So they could speak to that, but yeah, it definitely needs to be a person with authority, and that could definitely be a college professor, right? It could be that, but you just have to look, but you have to make sure that person can speak with authority, and then you have to develop not a personal relationship, but sufficient connection where they can speak credibly on your work. Does that make sense?
Yes, thanks, Mike. Yep, I got it.
Of course. Swati, anything to add for that?
No, expert letters completely depends upon what you want to prove. It's not like just like, see, independent experts letter you can definitely use in the final merit determination because they hardly fit into any criteria. But if you're trying to fit in, then please make sure the narration is going very correct. It's not coming around like out of the blue. You are just putting, just putting one independent expert letter.
Yeah.
That does not make any sense. So make sure that if anything you are coming up around for the recommendation letter, that needs to be narratively very much tightened in the petition itself. So for example, what I'm trying to say is, for example, if you are proving your original contribution, right? A founder level is proving the original contribution. So you can definitely put up one addition with the objective evidence. You can put up one recommendation letter from one of your, founder who can literally say about how the original contribution has came up together. So there has to be a narration. There cannot be a disconnection of something that you want to prove and you are trying to say. So it totally depends how you're narrating. Sometimes in a very complex situations like authorship articles, so there is an article that you have written and you wanted to prove the impact of that authorship article. In such situations also you can get some professors or anybody author who has written that paper with you, or an expert who knows about the authorship articles, and they can definitely help you out in understanding that how that paper's impact is there. So the impact comes into a different dimensions, not only on the domain, but social impact is also there. So it totally depends how you are putting the narration into the picture. That helps a lot. Okay, so the next question is, does all the recommendation letters be on the letterhead? Ideally, it is good to have a letterhead. It looks very authentic, and USCIS loves reading the letter of recommendations on letterhead. Okay, but it's not a blocker. So if you do not have a letterhead, it's fine. You can put it in the A4 size paper, but there is a clause. Please remember, there are some information which is mandatory to put in the salutation. That is the name of the person who is signing off, then the designation of the person, where that person is working, the address, the office address of the person, the contact details that should carry the contact number as well as the email ID. So these are important things that needs to be there in the letter of recommendation. If letterhead is not there and you are plain putting it to the petition.
Swati, one question following up on that. So somebody who is not currently working with me, can I also get letters of recommendation from them? They were there in like 10 years before, but they're still in touch with me. They're
Yeah,
not
yeah,
really.
yeah, definitely. So if you and him has worked before in some project and you wanted to have that person recommendation letter, you can definitely use it. And you don't have to work together in a company at the same current time, but you have worked some time later in the year, you can definitely use that person's letter of recommendation and have him sign off.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Yeah, just as long as they have something relevant to say and authority to say it. Right? It doesn't matter in time, because if you've had extraordinary ability, you could have an impact on the field since 10 years ago easily. So as long as they have authority to say it and they have relevant information to provide that's going to support your claim and not just be extra paper, because it's not talking about your character, right? It's talking about your impact, right? So yeah.
Got it. Thank you so much.
All right. I guess anybody else still wanted to ask any question, please unmute yourself and speak, because we covered almost all questions out here from the chat box.
Looks like we answered everything, Swati. We're the dream team.
Yeah. Okay, so we wind up now. Thank you so much for being with us every time. There is one more question coming from Vikas, the last question. My elder brother is in academics from 25 years and a senior professor in a very small reputed business school. So can I ask LOR from him, or family member can also give LOR? Ideally, a big no from a family member, brothers, or anybody else. And
even if they're professionals.
Yeah, because you're like filing for an extraordinary ability, family, friends will always speak high regards about you. And USCIS does not want to like read how good you are. They know you are good. That's why you have choose DB1A. They wanted to understand how you are documenting your extraordinary ability. So refrain adding, family and friends in the letter of recommendation.
Yep, agreed.
All right, so we wind up now. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you so much, Michael, for always coming up and like navigating us, sharing beautiful insights, which helps all our immigrants filing extraordinary ability and understanding immigration law in depth. We will see you again super soon next week. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.